He just made me eating Kit Kat.
Embedded commands to eat Kit Kats, to chocolate, to have,
I don't think you embedded
to have
commands
more.
to Kit Kats. You
never
only eat
kill
Kit
us.
Kats because you want enhanced neuroplasticity.
That's what you say, yeah, exactly. See?
Because it's true. Because we know that chocolate has the highest concentration of oxytocin than any other food.
There's a lot of sugar too.
Oh yeah, but you know, you take the good with the bad. I also do weight loss, so it's okay.
Yeah.
All right. So what do we learn? Are we back in? We back on?
Yes.
We are live.
All right. So what do we learn from this exercise? Veronica, what was this like for you? What'd you learn?
Interesting.
Interesting.
Because it definitely goes with the real life. I mean, it's like.
You mean it's an accurate? It's an accurate.
And convincer that is.
It's crazy, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. But remember, they didn't figure this shit out overnight. It took them 3,000 years.
Wow.
To figure out how to look at the markings on somebody's. Why? Because everything in Chinese medicine is based on one thing, two words: pattern recognition. We didn't have supercomputers to crunch, 80 trillion bits of information in 2.5 minutes. Right? We had 3,000 years to just keep looking at faces and noticing what kept showing up. Right? And that's really where it comes from. Now, these people had a little bit more on the ball, I think, than in some cases than we do now, because they were much more sensitive to the natural world around them. Right? And that's what you'll see in many indigenous cultures. They are much more connected to their environment and the physical and the attributes that go with that than people who are very urbanized, for lack of a better word, or highly enculturated. And I shouldn't say that, because indigenous tribes can be very enculturated as well. They're just differently enculturated. So I believe that these people had access to heightened levels of ability that are largely blunted in us. We can develop them. Some people come in with those genetic markers flipped on. Chinese would call that inherited Jing, traits you get from your mother and your father. The Chinese used to say that when you fix something in yourself, it generalizes backwards 7 to 9 generations, and it generalizes forward 7 to 9 generations. So if you want to fix your grandkids, fix your shit now. Right? If you want to fix your ancestors' shit, fix your shit now. And there's, as funny as that sounds, and as hokey as it sounds, there's now proof that genetic traumas are inherited from our grandmothers and our grandfathers and stuff like that. They call it generational trauma.
Yeah.
Okay? There's a book out there, if you guys are interested in that, called It Didn't Start With You. And it's all about this idea of trauma, PTSD being passed on a cellular level through the generations. Right? And then they talk about how to fix it. Same way and here's the cliff notes. The same way you fix generational trauma is the same way you fix present day trauma. Hypnotherapy. Point to where you feel it. Right? But again, because they're coming from the CBT type of a place, they come at it a little bit more dialogue based, which is okay. Eventually they do altered state work and the shit comes out and they fix it. Right? But at the end of the day, trauma is trauma. Doesn't matter where it came from. Right? But conversely, or complementarily, the talents, abilities, and unique attributes and skill sets that you have are also Jing. That's why you can see that in the shape of the forehead. Someone who has a very round forehead tends to be more creative, more artistic. Many times you'll see that they're a little bigger on one side or the other, and the right side and the left side is father and mother. So if they have a lot of traits that they've inherited from their father, they'll be a little bit bigger on this side. If they have traits that they've inherited from their mother, they'll be a little bit bigger on this side. Many times you look at somebody and you'll see like a little divot down the middle. And what you see are inherited traits that are actually antitheses of each other. And part of their life mission is to find a way to balance those. Okay? You don't have one of those. You were just handy.
Yeah.
Right? So when you start looking at forehead, and again, there's so much. I mean, if this is the scope of everything, we haven't covered the fingernail yet. Right? But you see how much depth and what did you guys notice? You found yourself the minute you started poking at a trait, they just started to kind of disclose, and they just kept going. That's the unpacking process I was telling you about. Something happens as a byproduct of face reading training is that you start to become agent provocateur. It's like you'll talk to somebody and all of a sudden they'll just start emoting and processing shit out spontaneously. I was always pretty provocational anyway. The minute I got into face reading, it's like it exponentiated. It's like I could look at somebody, hi, right? You're looking nice today. Thank you very much. I'm going to go hide now. Right? Hashtag me too, goddamn. Anyway, Nanette, what'd you learn? What'd you get out of this?
I saw a lot in there.
You saw? Yeah?
I'm sorry.
Juanita.
I was looking at Juanita's ears, and yeah, there was something kind of in everything, and when she started talking about it, telling me all about what was going on.
Mhm.
You know, not specifically, but generally.
Was it accurate?
Yeah, yeah.
Was it crazy how accurate it was?
Yeah.
Right? Bien? What'd you notice?
A lot of different ears.
A lot of different ears? Okay.
It's hard to tell. They all look fine to me. I can't.
we need to give a little bit of time. Ben needs to go to the remedial ear class. Right? Get you a little like microscope or something. You can find the differences. Bueller's.
All the ears look fine.
Yeah. All look good.
Inspector 3. They passed.
Yeah.
It was good to see Joe's ears because they're actually, from what we could tell, pretty smooth to start off with, except for one place.
Mhm.
But and then to compare that against other ears, it had a lot more stuff happening.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's not as much as bump wise,
Yeah.
and deformation wise.
Mm-hmm. Now keep in mind that somebody can have a lot of trauma and be completely smooth. Because it's not about the trauma, it's how it affected them. Understand? If you get someone who's got very flat Shen and almost no wrinkles or whatever, chances are they haven't been in their body for a very long time. They're numb.
Associated, yeah.
They're chronically and terminally, I don't want to say terminally, but pretty close to dissociate. They're a walking dead person.
Yeah.
Right? So you got to do a lot to get them to want to come back in their bodies. Dissociative identity disorder, you're going to see that flat aspect a lot. Right? Because they're not in their bodies.
Totally.
Right? There's 3 or 4 of them hanging out somewhere else. And they take turns. You're turning the barrel. You know? Yes.
What do you do if you see someone like that who's totally out of body?
I got to find a way to get them back in.
Okay, so then that can look a lot of different ways. You don't
Yeah.
have one different.
It's going to depend on what's in front of me.
Yeah.
Like the time I had this 65, I don't know, he's in her late 50s, early 60s, somewhere between 50. I can't remember. Hard to tell. She came in, she did the consult. She was like a 50-something-year-old lady. She walks in for the treatment, their second treatment, and there's a 50-year-old, 5-year-old, just like this. Terrified. I had to change states real quick, right? And we had to get her back. And we had to get the 5-year-old to want to go through therapy, right? So, being able to think on your feet comes in real handy, right? Now, none of you, unless you got doctor or a heck of a lot of physician referrals on your desk saying you can work with those people, you should not be working with that level of a person, okay? But if you're in that situation where somebody all of a sudden has a personality shift, then you've got to change gears too. And you've got to change how you, and I treated him like a 5-year-old and it worked fine, right?
Yeah.
But most people would go, little dust cloud where the therapist used to be, right? Stephen.
I'm just getting used to the different ears, that there are different ones.
You didn't know they were different, did you?
Yeah, I didn't. Never thought about
People
that.
are different. I didn't know that.
Ears are ears, right?
Someone give me a napkin. I kind of spilled my shit.
And so, building a baseline,
Good.
getting familiar.
The most immediately useful things were the things I showed you first. Right side, left side, upper, middle, lower. Right? Most of us are not going to be looking at a person's ears at a networking function. Right? Well, you might. Yeah. And so that's why I started with something that's just, immediately I can look at someone and say, okay, they're digital, or they're data driven, they're practical, they're instinctive. And I can play to that, right? I can look at their private side and say, okay, they're far more, secretive on their private side, right? Or their heart's not quite as open privately. So I know that in their personal life, this person is probably not as emotionally available as when they're out pretending to be a public person, right? This could be a very introverted person who's pretending to be a very extroverted person, right? So these are things you can look at. You can look at the lines on the face and notice that they have, if they have disappointment lines, and it's deeper. It's deeper in the private zone. They've had a lot more disappointments privately than they have professionally. Right? You can start to extrapolate based on the depth of the markings and where it's located on the face, a lot of information. And you can, thinking in terms of presuppositions, what's presupposed by those lines, right? And you can create a profile of that person. And the nice thing is, these things I'm sharing with you, you can do from across the room. You don't have to engage with them. You can just look at them, through the window or your telescope. I'm sorry. Did I say that out loud? Don't do that. No. How about Jeff? What'd you learn?
Well, we've been focusing on the perimeter of the ear. What about the inside?
When we look at the inside of the ear, all the internal organs are in here. So you got the heart, the kidney, the liver, they're all in here. So we didn't really cover a lot of the in terms of indentations or markings. But when you start looking at the inside of the ear, you want to start looking at coloration changes. Okay, white equals deficiency or frozen energy or cold. Heat equals inflammation. Blue or purple equals stagnation of some kind, which is usually blood stagnation leads to all kinds of lesions and tumors and things like that. But when you look at the inside of the ear, that's primarily what we're looking at. I haven't seen a lot of markings in terms of the inside of the ear, but coloration changes is what you would look at. I'm sorry. In Chinese diagnosis, we're going to do a lot with ear colorations. Okay. So,
You're stepping into this.
I'm stepping into it. Story of my life.
That's what she said.
Yes. Oh, Jeff is fitting right in. All right. So let's see where I want to go with this. I guess we'll talk about this. All right. Emotions in the face. Hashtag annoyance. Okay. All right. So starting clockwise. Actually, we'll start with TJ's favorite. This is called the seat of the stamp. This area right here. This corresponds in many traditions to the third eye. Some of the ways that you can begin to spot an open third eye is if it's very bright here, very bright, or there's an indentation. It tends to indicate someone whose third eye is open. When you have these little creases, if you look at TJ's, the center line of his head, we call that suspended bazooka. Right? This area is called the seat of the stamp. This is usually associated amongst being associated with the liver gallbladder area and internal organ lines. It's associated with the wood element, which is all about passion, drive, competition, conquest, compassion. These are called wood energies. Okay. This also tends to be related to the fraternal side, or the dominant male role model. Now, the dominant role model could be female, but back in ancient China, there was pretty much homogenous. There wasn't two moms. There may have been two moms, but you get what I'm saying. So this also pertains to how a person relates to their father's influence. Okay, so many times you look at people, and you'll see a single, very thin line. See if anybody's got one of those. You ain't got one. You ain't got one. Well, yeah, not you. No, but actually, you got a little bit of one. You got a little bit. Little, not a lot. Not a lot. I wouldn't classify that. We call that suspended needle. Suspended needle occurs when, in the normal evolution of a father and a child, there comes a point where the child starts to exert their own will, usually in the form of anger. And at some point, the child expressed anger, and the pushback was so severe that they choked in, they withheld and withdrew part of that power. They suppressed their wood energy because of the consequences. For example, this wasn't a father-son thing, but this was a kid who was usually a pretty easygoing, but he was a big kid. One time people were picking on him. He just lost his temper, and he clocked a guy. And I guess it was during a basketball game or something. He clocked the guy because the guy kept checking him and fouling him. He got thrown out. He got suspended, and he developed this big line because he wanted to make sure that he never experienced that again. Now, on the surface, that might seem like a good thing, but what happens is when you choke back your liver energy, you're choking back your power. And so it may not be a problem right away, but at some point, that blockage is going to manifest as an inability to move forward in life until you resolve it. Right? Now, the deeper the level of energy that you're holding back, the bigger that line. That's why we make fun of TJ. We call what he has suspended bazooka, right? Because
that is, it still can be thin or
he's the one that, like, if you look at Stevens, he's not quite there, but he's closer to a suspended needle. Then you look at the size of TJ's marking, right? And so it goes suspended needle, suspended sword, and then I make a joke, suspended.
Even Lily and her, when I first met them, I knew nothing about this, and they both went, "Wow, would you look at it?" And I'm like, "All right, okay, what's that mean?"
Yeah, and then he wouldn't leave him alone after that. He actually came up to me like I think it was either after the first day or at a break or something. Every time I hang out with you, my fucking mind gets blown. And it wasn't about me. It was just what he gets exposed to. Because you said the same thing about Brent Baum when we brought him in, right? Planet David's a cool place. It's not about me. It's just about the people that pass through, and what you get exposed to and what you take away from it. So when you see that single line, understand that there's probably some father issues going on there, or at least the male side of the family issues. If the mom is the more alpha, has the more masculine role, that could be a mom, right? So be very careful how you word it, right? Be very careful how you word it. If you see two lines, and a lot of you have this is basically an indicator of impatience, which leads to annoyance and irritation. This is where your frustration to anticipation would work really well, right? But it's chronic. They've been doing this for a long time, right? And a lot of times these people will be klutzy. So if it's been going on for a long time, they have what we call rebellious liver chi, which they want to move so fast they outpace their own agility. I'm like that all the time. If I sit for too long, I'm the world's biggest klutz. Because the minute I start moving, I'm throwing this and I'm doing that, I'm spilling coffee, right? I can't pour a glass of milk without making a mess. I just can't. It's just that's why I just drink it out of the bottle. Fuck it. Right? I find shortcuts. That's what I do, right? So this is a very important area. This also has an indicator of someone who has a very open area between the eyebrows. Hold on a second. Somebody who has a big open area. Come on, damn it. Ooh, okay, that's weird. Let's put my mark back. All right. Screw you, Microsoft. All right. When this area is nice and big and open, this is what we call father's blessing. And this is somebody who, because of father's influence or the masculine influence, has learned to work well in a corporate structure. They're genetically employable. Okay, they know how to play the game. They know how to rise through a hierarchy. Does that make sense? So these people can be very, very good as part of an organization. People who don't have father's blessing, they tend to be the other way. They can't work for anybody because the boss is always a fucking idiot. Unless they're the boss, in which case he's a fucking genius. Right?
About the middle here?
Yeah. If this is very open.
Open meaning like no lines? Or what? Like
It's open. It's there's not a lot of creases,
okay.
things like that. Yeah. I recommend you all get Lillian's book, Face Reading in Chinese Medicine.
Second edition, right?
Second edition, yeah. And again, we'll be doing a lot. We're going to do a lot with face reading because I really believe that face reading is kind of like one of the missing links in a lot of the things. Why is it like that? Okay. Yeah, there is a digital version. So I look at that a lot. If someone's got a big, heavy brow line, these people, as a rule, are not going to be team players. They can be, but they're far more likely to just want to be their own person and do their own thing their way. When you're paying them, They will do what you tell them, grudgingly, and then they will tell you all the ways they could have done it better. Why? Because they have that brow, that very strong wood brow, the brow bone itself. Okay? These people, however, love to be the hero. So ladies, if you need help with your bags, look for a guy with a big brow bone and play the damsel in distress, and they will happily carry your bags up 20 flights of stairs. But don't try to pay them for it. You understand the difference? They like to be saved. TJ, classic example, loves to be the hero. You're in deep shit now because there are 5 women here just painted a target on your ass.
I got a little bags to carry.
But it's true, right? And if you understand that, you also know that these people will work harder for praise than they will for dollars. Letting them know how appreciated you are, how much they've helped, how grateful you are. They will slave for you, right? Whereas if you're paying them, you're an idiot because they're Mr. Betterway or Mrs. Betterway most of the time. Okay. His lovely partner Tina, classic Miss Betterway, right? They're made for each other because they never stop moving. They're classic wood metal personalities, right? The only time you see TJ is you either see his ass because he's leaving to go something else, or he's manning the camera or he's never stopping. He's always fixing something. He's always evaluating the area to see what he can do. Me, I get exhausted just watching him, right? But you want those kind of people, but you have to know to understand that along with those admirable physical qualities, there are some mental and emotional characteristics that you have to use and manage effectively. You can't treat them all with the same template. TJ is a very wood person with a side odor of metal. Tina, very metallic as well as being very wood. Would not do well in a very earthy environment where people are kind of kicking back, being very comfortable, watching, they have their favorite chair and they have, they're just, earth people work hard, but they don't work for the sake of working.
Until you get into my office where
that's where he does his earth.
Yeah, because everything is right here.
Yeah. But it's there so he can work. You understand? Earth people have their favorite chair and nobody better sit in it. Right? If you look at an earth person, just like TJ is saying, everything is within reach. Like they don't have to move. Earth people don't like to move. When they go to work to take care of the family so they can go on vacations, so they can spend time with their family, right? That's why they're at work. That's an earth personality, right? Wood people, they work because they need to work. They can't sit still. They have to be productive. They have to be doing something. They work hard, they play hard, right? Metallic people are always finishing stuff. It's like nothing's ever quite done, right? So they're always, they go from organization, which is a wood quality, to orderly, which is a metal quality, right? You get someone, TJ gets very metallic when he does a lot of crafts work, when he does a lot of like home furnishings and things like that. He's very, very meticulous in the moldings and all those things. So that's his metal side coming out. But his drive to get things done is very wood. So understanding these aspects of people, and again, we'll go deeper into that in the January training where we talk about personality and temperament. What we're talking about today mostly is lifestyle and constitution work. So if you were looking at classical Chinese medicine, you'd be looking at Jing, Qi, Shen, Ling, and Ming. Okay, Jing roughly equates to lifestyle and constitution, which can also relate to trauma history. Qi relates to personality and temperament. Shen relates to psycho-emotional and cognitive issues, charisma, mental illness or mental health, those kinds of things. Okay, deception versus honesty. Ming is about your golden path. You're finding your mandate from heaven. It's more of the divinatory, prognosticative side of things. And then Ling is more of the mystical, magical training. All right, and that branches into advanced geomancy, which you call feng shui, which is actually a form of earth magic. That's largely been watered down in this country. Very powerful stuff, but you don't need to know Ling, Jing, Ji, Shen. You just need to know, okay, do I want to study lifestyle and constitution and health issues? Do I want to study personality and temperament? Do I want to look at psycho-emotional environment? Right? And that's how I'm organizing the face reading material into modules and segments that are directly relatable to where we need to use them. Right? Yes?
Are there any good resources for real feng shui?
For real, Lillian Bridges.
Lillian Bridges?
Lillian actually was known as one of the leading authorities on feng shui before she started making it for a name for herself in face reading.
Does she have any books on that, or is it Decode?
If you go to lotusinstitute.com, she's actually expanding her line of books that she's offering. She just finished a cookbook, actually.
Really?
Yeah. She's a big foodie. Yeah. I think she's giving Elizabeth Taylor a run for her money in terms of marriages, but she's an expert on it, so, you know.
So the guy's face was perfect and then it changed.
Yeah, something like
Outta here.
that. Well, it's interesting that sometimes we don't take our own advice.
Oh, okay.
We see what we want to see, right? And it's interesting that, you know, people were asking about erotic, you know, sexuality and erotic hypnosis. One of the most challenging lovers you'll ever have is the metallic lover. Because metallic lovers have a specific way that you have to make love to them. And it has to be the same way every time. Which drives fire people crazy. Because fire people are putting on costumes, they're dressing up like Little Bo Peep, there's somebody different every time, different positions, throwing them around, putting them in a suplex, stuck, you know, whatever. That's a fire person. You can always tell a fire person because when they come home from work, there's a trail of clothing from the door to the bedroom because they're throwing shit off, right? They're all over the place, right? They're very energetic. They never sit down, right? Wood people are like, I'm here, I need to go there, fuck you, right? Right? Metallic people, well, I need to go here, but I need to make sure everything is just right before I leave, and I need to make sure I do this route to this place, and then go this way, and then... Get the idea? Yeah.
What are water people like?
Water people are kind of go with the flow, but they can be very willful, because, you know, actually the water element is actually the seat of the willpower.
Interesting.
So there's actually there's a trait that Chase Hughes discovered, a facial trait, that there's not a lot of empirical studies on it yet, but it dovetails perfectly with face reading, that in women who are, you saw this in a lot of the Manson girls, the cult members, that there was a very, on those particular women, there was a very pronounced smoothness to the lower eyelid that indicated something about being susceptible to the cult-like influence and things like that. I haven't done enough research on that to find out if that's just a fluke or if there's more to it. But the eye itself, the eye socket, is related to the water element, which is also related to the will.
Sure.
Right? The eye, the width of the eye is open, is the heart, which is the lion's share of you. So if you think about that, there's a huge correlation between suggestibility and belief systems and willpower and the Shen. Right? So I haven't fully mined that out yet, but I think there's something there worth exploring. Right? I haven't found enough good pictures of the Manson girls that I can actually examine that trait. So I'm talking with Chase right now, see if he can send me some. I want to know how he found that trait or whatever. But it's interesting that you can. One of the things that you can always count on. We got some good lip people in the room, so we'll play with lips a little bit. Let's talk about lips. Well, you want to talk about lips or you want to talk about emotions?
Emotions.
Emotions? They always want to talk about emotions. That's all right. No, it's fine. It's actually one of the most, to me, when I first started looking at all the different graphs, this was the one that jumped out at me right away, because I'm a therapist, right? And once I understand what your emotional environment, your emotional world is like, I know what buttons to press or not, right? So if you're looking at, now, these are not to be confused with micro-expressions. Micro-expressions are momentary expressions that happen in like an eighth of a second as we're trying to process or hide an emotion. Okay? We're trying to conceal it in some way, so it leaks. But it's only there for a fraction of a second. To put this in context, I believe what you're seeing here is the consequence of a lifetime of micro-expressions. Expressing the same emotion multiple times over years. Okay? So some of the ones that we want to look at first, and that's why I kind of started with this area. Oops. Because this is where our eyes tend to go first. If you notice how your eyes just naturally track, it starts at like just above the eyes and then it kind of zigzags down. So when I'm organizing the traits and stuff that we're doing in January, that's how I'm organized. I'm not organizing it by Jing, Qi, Shen. I'm organizing it by eye tracking. And then I'm going to give you all the traits for that area. So literally you can just go the way your eyes naturally move and start to unpack what's in front of you. Does that make sense? Now I'm going to do a master track later on where I teach you the classical energetic approach. But I think what's more important for people is that they can go out and start just using it right away. And I think that this gives us, it cleans out a lot of nomenclature that's largely useless unless you're a healer, unless you're an Oriental practitioner, right? So you can come and get that stuff on the back end and then decide what you want to do with it. That's how I'm looking at it anyway. Okay, so seat of the stamp, very important. Okay, let me erase this. So if we look at clockwise, the 1 o'clock position right here, these are skepticism lines. So when you see these lines up here, these are people who are going to take everything you say with a grain of salt. Joe has a huge one. See this right here? He doesn't believe shit. Right? Yeah, a little bit.
You gotta convince them.
Yeah. Yep.
So it doesn't have to be on both sides?
No,
Side
it doesn't
to
have to be,
side?
no.
If
No.
they're there, they're there?
No, it's not really that big. He might be more skeptical because people are trying to sell him shit all the time. He's also a salesman. So you notice it's on his right side, right? But you may get him in the bar and tell him what a hunky guy he is. He'll go, oh. Right? He'll just eat that shit up, right? Right? Katie, she's pretty smooth, so you can tell her anything. Jeff's got a huge one right here. Right? More deep. Notice it's more deep in his public side than it is on his private side, right? Yeah, not so much. You got a teeny one right there. You got one here. You're actually, you got hit on a lot when you were younger. Guys telling you all kinds of shit, didn't they? Yeah. That was just an again, you'll start, these intuitive channels will start to open because the skepticism line is on her private side. So who would be lying to her most often in her private life? Guys. Right? She heard the same line, pickup line, too many times. Right? Okay.
Too mean.
You'll believe anything you're told. No. He's got a little bit. You got a nice one right here. But it's only there when you smile. Yeah. He's very smooth here, but here you got people making excuses for not turning in their homework.
So does it make a difference if you scrunch your face or don't?
It's more pronounced if it's there when you're not scrunching. But you'll see a lot of times when people have, like, they go into grief or they feel sad, those lines just pop out. I cleared an old grief. I don't even know what it was. I'm not even sure exactly. I have an idea what it was from, but I was at my last face reading class. One of the most triggering places I ever go is a face reading class. Because you get in the room with Lillian and your whole neurology starts going, here! Let me emote on you! Right? Whether you want it to or not, this shit just bubbles out. By like halfway through the second day, I'm plowing through all the food she's brought like it's going out of style because my system needs to ground. Right? It's not uncommon for me to go to a 5-day training and come home 12 pounds heavier. Because just getting in the room and going through that process starts your body to just transmute. Thank God she brings relatively healthy food. But then again, by the end of the second day, they've gone through that. Now they're up to sugar. Right? Yes?
Quick question. Like when we raise our eyebrows up,
Mm-hmm.
then we want to hear, and people are more prone to talk to us, right? So, and that's when we mostly create, that's when you can see these lines, right? And so when you're skeptical, then we go like this, right?
Or sometimes you get the Spock eyebrow.
Without,
Right?
one,
Yeah.
right? Good. Now, this is,
How long did you practice
how is that? All the time.
Sorry.
So, so basically right now, how is it possible that these lines are actually skepticism when if I want to hear what you're saying, if I'm really interested, I'm going to create those? That's what I'm curious.
Well, you're associating behavior with emotion,
Okay.
and there's not necessarily the correlation in this context.
In this context, not? Okay.
I don't know that there is or isn't, but this to me doesn't necessarily mean. Remember when you're skeptical, you're not waiting to hear. You're evaluating what's being said. So your eyes will tend to squint a little bit. You'll be like, right? That's more skeptical.
This skeptical.
As opposed to, right?
So I guess my question is, when you do that, is that how you create these lines by?
I'm sure that's part of it. I'm sure there's much more to it than just that, but I'm sure that's part of it.
Because how do you create sadness line, sorrow, like grief? How do you create? I mean, what kind of
By
facial
crying,
expression do you?
or not crying, as the case may be.
Like holding it in.
More often than not, these lines are indicative of things you're not expressing.
Yeah.
When you express them properly, they tend to go away. You literally can lose a wrinkle. And I've seen it.
Even your hands can change, the lines in your hands.
Yep. Were you the one that made that comment online? Someone said exactly the same thing on the YouTube that I did the other day.
No,
Yeah.
no, but I
Yeah.
studied a little bit.
Okay. So, oops, don't want to do that. I gave him a black eye. So skepticism, very common. We're going to do this, again, well, we're here till 6, so I got all the time in the world to do this. But, I should ask this, I know the answer already, but do you guys want to actually take a lunch break, or do you guys will just keep going?
Keep going.
All right. TJ's like, I want to eat, goddammit. No. If you guys want to get some food, you're more than welcome to go and bring it back if you want to continue training. I will tell you that around 2-ish, the elevator stops running, so you will have to use the stairs to get in and out. If you need to move cars, you might want to do that now, right? So just putting that out there. Joy can be seen it starts at the outer canthus. Let me change the size of that.
So when I move cars, like the thing is not closing down, is it?
No,
Okay.
you're fine. Let me just erase this. And where's the? I want to change the size here. There we go. That's better. So when you're talking about joy, most of these lines that we're going to deal with now deal with, aside from joy, deal with some kind of loss. Okay? And again, it starts at the outer canthus of the eye and comes upward. Now you're fine most of the time, unless that, oops, did we spill? Okay. So you see this a lot. Usually you're going to see the inverse of that too, which is sadness, which is a line that starts from the outer canthus and goes down. Okay. Now every now and then you'll see people whose line starts here and travels way up past the brow. The higher the line travels past the brow, you're now starting to go from joy or excitement to mania. And these are people who will be manic depressive. They may have bipolar disorder. They just be, we have a president who has these lines. That's why he's up at 3 o'clock in the morning tweeting. Right? Not a good thing. They can be very productive, but they can also be very, very volatile.
Very what?
Volatile. Oh. Right? So in what we call a Shen disturbance, you may see those kinds of lines, a psycho-emotional disorder. Okay?
Wow.
So, and it's important also that when we talk about joy, that we understand the Chinese or Asian concept of joy. If you go to Chinese medical training, they'll tell you that too much joy hurts the heart. When they're talking about pathological joy, what they're talking about is excitement. Like, you've heard stories of people win the lottery and die of a heart attack. That's excessive joy. Joy that's so extreme, the heart stops, right? People who take too much Coke and their heart just can't take it, right? That's joy, right? From a pathological perspective. The healthy version of joy that the Chinese espouse that's good for the heart is more like contentment, peace. Does that make sense? So you understand the degree of difference, right? joy in terms of being pathological is an adrenaline rush, like a way too strong adrenaline rush over too much time. And you'll see that a lot of times with people, especially here.
Can you move the picture to the other side of the screen, please?
I could. Question is, will I?
Only if you want people online to see what you're doing.
Well, I got too much shit in the way.
Okay.
See if I can. It's not letting me move shit.
Also a question from online.
Mm-hmm.
What does it mean if there are darkened areas on the outer corner of the eye and indented?
Oh yeah, mine is very indented.
Darkened areas on the outer corner of the eye and indented. I don't actually know. I don't actually know. I'd have to see the trait.
That's what good trainers say.
Mm-hmm.
That's what good trainers say.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Let me take a look at your eye, sweetie.
Some people don't
So
say that.
she has actually, it's hard with the makeup because she accentuates her features very well here. But you notice how she has very sharp corners in here?
Mm-hmm.
That's fire. Those are fire traits. Fire energy can be seen in the corners in the eye. So there may be something fire related there. Now, when we talk about dark areas in the eye, a lot of times that can be kidney issues. If the temples themselves are dark and indented, this is somebody who's probably got a problem with some form of addiction. Indented temples are what we call a desire for altered states. And altered states can be drugs, they can be meditation, it can be spiritual experiences, it can be anything. So when you see, like if you look at classic Robert Downey Jr., right? He's got this massive indentation, right? He's craving altered states. And he's finally made the transition from drugs to martial arts. But now from what I understand, he hyperdoses on vitamins.
Of course.
Right? So he's reoriented that behavior to something that's more healthy, more positive, but it's still there. I have huge indentations, right? And you look at what I do, right? So mine tend to be a little bit brighter, but if it's really dark, it's usually somebody who's coping with some kind of substance issue. Okay.
You have the dark temples?
No, I have lighter
Oh, you have
temples.
brighter
Yeah,
temples.
yeah.
It's interesting.
Although I have an addictive personality too. I can't stop touching it. Anyway, that's a different. There we go. Okay. A line that's really cool, we don't see it that often, but it's really cool when we see it, is called a transformation line. I got one! Yay! Yay! And what these usually symbolize is you went through some long, dark night of the soul. Sometimes those long, dark nights last for decades. But you came out of it on the other side with a revelation that changed you and transformed you on a deep spiritual level.
Where do you have that?
So I think it's either...
Yeah, it's on the left.
Right, it's on the left side.
I've got 3 of them now.
You have 3 of them? Welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah, she's looking for the 4th one.
Yeah, actually, it's...
Coming.
Right.
And ironically, the new ones have been coming back and forth. I actually been checking it now, watching it, see why it's setting and trying to figure out what am I learning now.
Mm-hmm. A lot of times they'll come out when you're doing something on your path. Like Lillian talks about when she met the Dalai Lama or watched the Dalai Lama. There's this phenomena in Chinese medicine they call Buddha wings. And Buddha wings kind of look like this.
Oh, I see.
Okay? And if you look at the picture of the Dalai Lama when he's not teaching, they're there, but they're very subtle. And if you take a look at a picture when he's actually teaching, they're like. So many times when you go into the state associated with that marking, the marking gets amplified. So let me close this loop. When I was at Lillian's training, I was going through some tough stuff emotionally in my relationships, and it brought up stuff from past relationships. And I woke up the next morning, and I didn't put the 2 and 2 together. I had this mark, I had this wrinkle. I swear I could fit my finger in it. From the outer canthus, the inner canthus, all the way down. And it would not go away. And that night I went through some meditative stuff or whatever what is I did. I just sucked it up and went through it. When I woke up the next day, it was gone. But that, and I asked Lillian what it was because I didn't know what the hell this just, it was like poof, herpy, right? And I was like, oh, right? Guess who's coming to dinner, right? And hi, mind if I move in for a while? Right? And I asked Lillian, I said, what is this? She goes, oh, it looks like very old grief. Right? So these things can lay dormant below the surface. And then a trigger comes and it's usually a sign that you're processing it out. It's not a bad thing. Don't try to make the wrinkle go away. Fully engage in whatever the neurology is expressing, and then the marking will go away. It's when you try to repress these things or divert your attention from it that you prolong it. Okay? And that's when I keep telling you guys, you got to run into the burning building that everybody else wants to run out of if you want the maximum transformation in the minimum amount of time. That's what makes you an evolving human being and not an animal. It's very intuitive. Animals run towards the things that feel good, and they run away from the things that make them feel bad. It's counterintuitive to run as passionately towards the things that make you want to run away as does towards the things that make you feel good. And do the inverse. Move away from the things that draw you there because of the pleasure as a decision. You understand? But it's not until you go through those experiences and you realize the truth of it that you're more willing to do those things, right? And it's not easy. If it were easy, everybody'd be doing it, right? You guys are a little bit different than the average bear because you chose to be here. You self-selected to become more conscious, to become more self-aware, to tap into all that you're capable of being, right? That requires you to do something different than what you've been doing. Does that make sense? Okay? No one said it's going to be easy, but it is worthwhile, right? And that's the thing to hold on to. It's not easy, but it is worthwhile. Don't ask for a very wise person once said, don't ask for the world to be easier, ask for yourself to get tougher. Right? Okay. So transformation lines. You see these, you know right away somebody went through some shit, and they came out of it with some kind of enlightenment or lesson that dramatically changed them. I've gone through a bunch of those shit. I only got one line, though. I got gypped. All right. We talked about this one earlier. This is a health issue. If you see these sorry. Where's my doggone it? My ongoing war with where's my draw thing? There. Damn it. Damn it! Where'd it go? There it is. We'll just do this. Okay. When you see these, now where'd my cursor go? Okay. Jesus Christ. What a nightmare. All right. So these lines here, you can see them really good on me. Right? You can see these double lines here. When you see these, you know somebody somewhere has got blood pressure stuff going on. Right? Now, this is a sign of blood pressure irregularities. Okay, can you see it? Okay. One of the things that was explained to me, with this was that these people tend to overreact to things. So everybody's having this nervous laugh. Right? And I'll explain. I don't know how it is for everybody else, but the way it manifests for me is when somebody gives me bad news, I have this amazing startle response. Like my heart there's like this bolt of lightning that hits my heart and my pericardium, right? And then I have to calm down. And it lasts for a while for me, right? I don't know how it works for everybody else, but that's kind of what happens. Also, it tends to signal irregularities in the blood pressure, whether not necessarily always hypertensive or hypotensive. Sometimes it's just rapid fluctuations. And when we talk about glycemic problems, like hyperglycemia versus hypoglycemia versus dysglycemia. Hyperglycemia means you got too much blood sugar. Hypoglycemia means your blood sugar is low. Dysglycemia means you have rapid highs and rapid lows, and you're fluctuating between them. This is kind of what that signals in terms of blood pressure and emotional response, extremes. Does that make sense?
But it's blood pressure, not blood sugar.
Yes, blood pressure. Blood sugar is going to show up here.
How so?
Spleen and pancreas is in this area.
Okay, but like, what are you gonna see there?
Wrinkles, lines, horizontal lines across the river.
Okay, so
yeah.
different from the
Yeah, we're going to
vertical.
talk about
Okay.
trauma lines and things like that on the face. I don't know how much of it we'll get into because
Yeah.
we got other things we want to cover. But I wanted to give you guys just a sample platter, if I could, of what's possible for you as a face reader. And their face readers average about $500 to $700 a session, so it's not bad money, right? And again, depending on what you can go into health and lifestyle with it. You can go into persuasion and influence applications with it. You can become a fortune teller if you want to, right? You can look at it, you can go a lot of different ways with it. Okay, so let's go ahead and erase this real quick. Okay, so joy lines, we want those. The next one we're going to talk about is sadness lines. Sadness lines start at the outer canthus and they descend down. Okay? Most of us have these because you experience joy. If it's an intense sadness or you've had it for a bit longer, you haven't fully processed it out, these lines will start to grow. We call this sorrow. Okay. So one of the things I want you to become aware of is that every organ system can be found on the face. The entire body can be found on the face. Head is here. Arms are here. Legs are here. Okay. So we could actually treat the arms and legs here on the face. We could needle those areas or whatever. We can also look at the individual organs of the body itself and treat those through the face. And we can also see, because every organ has emotions connected to it. And so when the markings on the face pass through the area that pertains to a specific organ, you can extrapolate that either the organ itself is causing the problem or the emotion is affecting that organ. For those of you who are doing hypnotherapy, anytime you get a grief patient, or a lung problem patient, I guarantee you start unpacking grief. Grief, sadness, sorrow, right? The longer they have it, the longer they hold on to it, the more it starts to move down the face, right? And what you'll see, and by the way, this is the lung area. These are the lobes of the lungs. Yeah.
How do you know that, David? Is there a way to test it with
Oh yeah, yeah. It'll be you'll just see correlations. You'll see it on. If you see a marking here, you can look at their tongue. Look at the lung area on the tongue. You can feel the pulse. Feel the lung pulse. Right. There are definite corroboratory signs throughout the system that you can use to verify what you're doing. Right. And you got to remember that each of these organ systems are energetic systems. They're feedback loops. They're feedback loops. The organ and the organ energy system are connected, but they're not the same thing. The physical organ and the energy system also has the emotional component. So you can't, the Chinese never separated that out. Only the Western cultures did that. They separated mind from body. They looked at the human body as just spare parts, right? Yeah. Not an integrated communications network. Think more like, from a Newtonian perspective, they were wheels in a clock as opposed to like the internet or something like that. Right? And so we need to go back to this idea of a holographic information processing system where everything is connected by consciousness that transduces up or down in terms of frequency and vibration. And the law of correspondence reigns supreme. Right? The law of correspondence, the law of analogy. These are the two things. When we look at the body, Chinese medicine shows us more clearly, more practically than any other system out there how that's all interrelated and a way that we can use it. Yeah.
Could you give us acupressure that we can use on a daily basis, some points where we can press and feel certain things? Like,
yeah, that depends on what you want to do. What do you want to accomplish?
Yeah, I know, but
different point prescriptions create different effects.
If I'm asking for everybody to be beneficial, something that you use.
Oh, ear massage. You guys will like that. Ear massage. Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Because you'll be walking with a limp afterwards. You think I'm joking. That'll be the ladies. Trust me, the first time I started teaching ear massage, I had lines out the door. So it was like a Ferengi love fest, right? For those of you who remember second generation. Anyway,
So when specifically will you show that?
You want to make sure you're here for that, right?
Use it as a mystery. I'll let you know.
Isn't my life fun? All right, so let's look at the organs, because this is important, right? This is when you look at this is what I see when I look at the face. These are all your organs, right? Where do those lost love lines run? They run right through the lungs. Where do those sadness lines run? They run right through the lungs. Where do the sorrow lines run? Right through the lungs. So when you're dealing with any kind of respiratory issue, someone's coming to you with asthma, allergies, emphysema, COPD, you're going to see markings of some kind here. Okay? As you resolve the emotional underpinnings, these may start to disappear. And they can disappear very quickly. And a lot of it, I think, depends on how you address the problem. I think in a face reading context, if the markings here call your attention and you start unpacking it from that perspective, those lines will disappear. This is my theory. I don't know. I believe those lines will disappear faster. I believe if somebody's coming to you in a hypnotherapeutic context for lung problems, and you unpack it and you regress to cause, these may disappear. I don't know if they'll disappear faster or not. And I don't know if we would think to check, right? But I'm sure they're interrelated. Yes?
Do you ever have clients like take a picture of their face before a first?
Not in hypnotherapy, but I do in face reading. In fact, that's what we're going to do next. After we covered some of the things on the face, I'm going to have you guys do some readings on each other, which you've got like 5 or 6 emotions that you can look for. And I want you to read their faces. First, I want you to do and I'll have TJ set up a stable photo location. You can take a before picture. You go do a reading. Maybe unpack some stuff, get them to talk about it. You might get them to emote or be tearful or whatever, and take an after picture. Notice if there's any difference. There may or may not be. Yeah.
Can we zap them?
What do you mean? Yeah, if they're open to it.
Yeah, I'll be zapped.
Okay. Most of you are trained. And Jeff might have, like, what the fuck are they doing? Right? If you can point to where you feel it, Jeff, you can fix it. That's all you need to know. That's what makes what we do so user-friendly. It's a point-and-click therapy, right? Point to where you feel it, fix it, right? But this is what we're talking about. So people are asking about blood sugar issues. Blood sugar issues are going to show up here, usually as lines or multiple lines across this area, okay? We talked about, let's go back to this one I see a lot. And it's not on. And what's interesting is it's not on the facial map, which I think might be an oversight on Lillian's part. When you see lines that start here and move down here into that spleen and pancreas area, you're looking at anxiety. Anxiety and overthinking. Okay, a lot of you have this one. That means goes right. It's like the gerbil on a treadmill.
Gerbil.
Right, because you just keep thinking about shit over and over again. And this is a common thing in post-traumatic stress, in hypervigilance, in feelings of rejection and stuff like that, self-criticism. We start running scenarios over and over and over again in our head, trying to find some way to resolve it, but there's no resolution. It's just, you're just running that cycle over and over again. So when you see that, you know how they're living their life. They spend a lot of time worrying about stuff. And if you pace it, now they start to open up because you've demonstrated an understanding of their world that you couldn't possibly have known because they never told you. And you start getting attributed certain knowledge and omniscience that makes them very suggestible to you. Okay? So understand that these 3 areas, sadness, sorrow, and when it gets really long, it goes all the way down here, it's into grief. You'll see this a lot with people who have lost a loved one. A lot of times they're caregivers, and they can't get past the loss. They have things that haven't been said, things they needed to say, things they wanted to resolve, and there's no outlet for that, and so it toxifies, and it goes deeper. Okay? Finally, in the context of loss, there's this area. I'm going to use a different marker for this one. This is going to be a big one because when we talk about golden path, you're going to see this a lot because this shit happens. Okay, It's called lost loves. A lost love line starts at the inner canthus and travels down through the lung towards the same intersection point as grief. Now, lost loves, contrary to, it appears that this might relate only to romantic things. Lost love pertains to anything that caused you to become more embodied, that lifted your spirit, that you absolutely loved, that was a pillar or a building block of your identity, that you lost.
Yeah.
All right, so the example I sometimes use is like, let's say when you were, if you're a little girl, or a little boy for that matter, maybe you loved horseback riding. It's all you thought about. It was one of the biggest, most joyful, most enlightened, or made you feel more alive than anything else. And then years later, you meet somebody who not only do they not like horses, they can't even be around them. They can't think of, they have an issue with horses. And so because you love this person, you give up horses. You'll mark. So when you find these lines, this person has lost a valuable part of some activity or some pursuit that was a major portion of who they are. And as a healer, as a reader, you have to find a way to get them to tap into that, talk about it, and bring it back.
Yep.
Okay? It's a big deal. Okay? But notice how all these things have a common theme. Loss. Unresolved loss. Unexpressed loss. Okay? When you see somebody going along those same lines, when you look at somebody's lower lids, and you see puffiness or discoloration here, it's one of two things. It's either going to be tired kidneys or unshed tears. So when you see the puffy bags here, they're either getting close to kidney exhaustion, they're retaining water, or they have tears that they haven't shed yet. And so you need them to get them to release those. Okay? Questions? Okay, we're going to do 2 or 3 more, and then we're going to let you guys play a little bit. Okay? Humor. Humor's fun, most of the time. Humor lines can be seen by a little wrinkle right in the lower lip here. Since we're on lips, we'll talk about some more fun things about lips. Full lips equal a lot of earth energy. A wider mouth, and with the way we calibrate width of mouth, if we take the corner of the nose and we draw a straight line as tight as we can, if the mouth touches that line, it's normal. If the mouth doesn't reach the line, it's small. If the lips, without smiling, move beyond that line, you have a large mouth. Large mouths imply a lot of earth energy, which is equivalent to being more generous. Average mouth, average generosity. Small mouth, not quite as generous. Doesn't mean they can't be, it just means it happens fewer and farther between. Does that make sense? Yeah. When you smile, unless you're Joker, the corners of your mouth automatically go beyond that triangle. That's why people tend to be more generous when they're smiling.
Wow, that's interesting.
Hint, make them smile, then ask them for something. Right? And your kids know this.
Oh, yeah.
You know as a kid, you need to take the car, and the first thing you know is who's in a better mood. Mommy, right? Because if they're likely to smiling, they're likely to give you what you want, right? So, very, very powerful.
That's right.
Highly developed upper lip. This is somebody who, let me get my notes real quick. I may have to just default. There we go. I want my lip notes. Full lips tend to be generous, but tend to give more of the self and time than gifts. So somebody who has a very full mouth will spend more time give you more of their time than they will stuff. right? People with a full upper lip have a desire for intense emotional experiences. They may have a tendency to exaggerate things. Not saying anything, right?
I do it on stage.
You
I
do
do
it
it
on
on
stage.
stage. I
Right.
exaggerate.
Now, what's interesting about this particular trait is that it does actually correlate to a handwriting trait. In handwriting, you have an upper zone, a middle zone, and a lower zone. And we talk about lower loops. And the bigger the lower loop, the more exaggerated these people are great storytellers.
And lovers.
Like, huh? Oh, well, yeah. The bigger the loop, the greater the level of imagination. Okay? So if this person has like a flat tire on the way to a training or work or something, by the time they get to where they're going, it's a 3-car collision, they were almost killed, they had to call the paramedics, right? They tend to be a little bit more suggestible than others, okay? So they have a lot of imagination, a lot of variety, great lovers, usually. They like a lot of different stuff, they're very creative. But if we look at, I don't want to, so again, if the full upper lip, desire for intense emotional experiences, okay? But they'll tend to exaggerate. When they tell stories, they'll blow things out of proportion a little bit. Well, depends on the lips, I guess. But full lower lip, desire for physical pleasure, and Henry Krauss, apparently. But it's a joke. You'll get that. That's for something else. That was from the webinar. If the lip, I'm just going to give you these. If the lip turns out like really full, this person tends to be a little bit more on the word that Lillian used was lascivious.
What does that mean?
Lustful in a not so good way. Does that make sense? They tend to have poor sexual boundaries. If you can see into their mouth too easily. You see this in a lot. That kind of move, right? There's a rather colorful name for that. I won't go into it because we are on pub. I may get banned from Facebook if I say that shit.
Shit.
And a lot of times it shows either abuse or they're sexually promiscuous. I don't want to show this one. I'll just,
Sure.
I don't want to make the ladies self-conscious. Your sexual organs are on your face. Don't laugh, you got them too. I can tell a lot about your private parts by looking at your lips and your nose. So if a person's lips are very outturned, they tend to have poor vaginal tone. Right? None of you here have that. So just so you know, your gynecologist will be very happy. Or you're a statist. Right? So, but the full lips, good sign, good stuff. When they're too much, now you're going to the extremes. Right? Someone has poor sexual boundaries is extremely generous in the wrong ways. Right? But these are things you can look at. You can understand the size of certain private parts by we'll talk about that in the matchmaking class.
Keep on doing that.
Okay. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there. No pun intended.
Next class.
Okay. So another one a lot of people in this class have this. It's called a human angel marking. It's a little indentation right here. Human angel markings are people who are extremely compassionate. They usually have a strong desire to be caregivers and helpers. They're always a little bit sad though, because there's a very conscious part of them that knows they're from somewhere else, spiritually speaking, and this ain't it. So there's a part of them that always kind of wants to go back there, but they know they're here to do a job. Physiologically, this tends to correspond with anemia, some forms of anemic constitution. So these people are always a little bit blood deficient, as we say in Chinese medicine, right? And that happens physically as well as metaphorically. We're always giving of ourselves. So we always have a little bit less for ourselves, right? And so these people have to kind of force themselves to pamper themselves. so that they have something to give. Otherwise, they'll give until they have nothing left and then be very upset because it never seems to come back. Okay, that's exacerbated if you have very sparse eyebrows. Well, again, there's a lot of things you can start to trait stack after a while, but just learn this stuff individually. So humor lines are cool. You're going to see this. You guys are going to see these a lot. The next 2 or 3, you're going to see these a lot as caregivers. You're going to see fear, disappointment, and bitterness. Let me erase these and show and clarify these for you. Any questions from our folks at home?
Dr. wanted to know, what about lines from inner corner, but not going down like the example, but along the eye horizontally, then go down at the outer corner of the eye, kind of like sadness?
I think she's talking about pain, but we'll get to that in just a second. Okay, so first and foremost, and did you guys take a picture of this graph? Because you're probably going to want it when you start doing face readings. Okay. Fear is like dimpling, right? Now, if it's there without them having to like change their facial architecture, it's much more long-standing. If it only happens when they're talking about a fearful experience, it's a little bit more. I wouldn't say it's quite as serious or as chronic, but it's still there. It's just hidden. So look at, our president has these all over the place, by the way, in case you didn't notice. Disappointment starts at the outer corner of the mouth and goes down. Bitterness is multiple lines here. Okay? So you'll see that these often go to, these 3 often go together. Overnurturing, disappointment, and bitterness. Yes?
What about people who are heavy smokers?
Mhm.
They tend to have a lot of lines and wrinkles around their lips.
Yep.
How does that relate?
Why are they smoking? Right? Usually smoking is some form of attempt at controlling negative emotions or creating a state change. And it's usually because they're stressed. Anger, bitterness, fear. Bitterness bitterness is extremely toxic. Right? And what happens, from my perspective, the pathology, the pathogenesis, it starts with overnurturing. Then the overnurturing, because nothing ever comes back, they become very disappointed. And over a prolonged period, they become very bitter about it. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And you see this a lot with people who develop cancers. They're stuck in life situations where they're constantly giving, and there's no way out for them. And at some point, that energy builds up, and they decide to check out. Because that's the only way they can see to get out of the situation. Does that make sense? So even though I was taught these things singly. But if you think about the pathogenesis, most of the time, we're over-nurturing, we're giving our resource, it's not coming back, we're chronically disappointed by the family members, the people in our life, the relationships, whatever it is, we start to develop that, and then we get really bitter about it. Right? Yes?
If you want to have some fun, especially when you see people that have over-nurturing lines, ask them 2 questions. What do you do, and do you have children? And I find predominantly, especially women that have the over-nurturing lines, almost always have children, or they're in the healthcare teacher, some type of, where they're taking care of children or people. And I know a few people that have those predominantly. A friend of mine's mother, ironically, we would classify as not a very attentive, caring. She just wasn't a great mother, but very angry. 0 over-nurturing lines on her upper lip, but her bottom lip for bitterness and fear, holy cow, just raked.
Very good. Okay. So I call that the big 3. They may show up individually, or they may show up all together. But theoretically, from my perspective at least, I think that's kind of the basic path. There's no such thing as an emotionally healthy cancer patient. But when you see things like fibromyalgia, when you see things like anywhere you think there's secondary gain, you're probably going to see these markings. Because the secondary gain is an answer to a problem. By having a health issue, they get out of having to do something else. And so you have to unpack that and make sure that you found a way to satisfy that need as you're going through the process. Does that make sense? Okay. The last one, the two final ones that we're going to deal with. Well, all right, we'll just do the last three. Fuck it. First of all, pain. Pain starts at the outer canthus, and rather than going outward like sadness, it goes inward towards the nose at a diagonal. This might have been what Danka was talking about. Physical or emotional pain starts at the outer canthus and moves inward. Okay, so if you have somebody who's got back pain or chronic elbow pain for a long period of time, you may start to see markings going this way. Okay? And then finally, purpose lines are good lines. These are lines that run, again, from the same point as the triangle of the mouth, but these go down. These are we call them laugh lines. These are signs that you're on your path, that you're on your golden path. So you can look at certain people and you can know if they're more on track in their personal life or their public life, right? If they're balanced, then they're doing both, right? But you can look at some people and say there's nothing on one side and they're really locked. So they may have a horrible, horrible marriage or family life or whatever, but their job is just glorious for them, right? So these are good lines to have. We're always trying to get rid of lines. These are ones we want. These are the Chinese say these are the best lines to have because it shows you're doing what you came here to do, directly or indirectly. Okay, so we want to focus on purpose lines. Another one that's really important, and some of you have these, some of you don't. These are called auditory intuition lines. They're like little gills right in front of the ears. I got good ones. These are developed bullshit detectors. These people usually, it started off for most of them as a form of hypervigilance. They grew up in an environment where parents were either constantly in denial of certain things, where they had to emotionally or verbally or behaviorally walk on eggshells because saying the wrong thing would result in pushback. And they had to learn how to listen between the lines, so to speak, to know what not to say and what to say. So these people have a very, very highly refined ability to sense truth from falsehood and to kind of get a read on people's moods and emotions and know what's going on with them. But it starts out as a form of hypervigilance. Okay? There also, physiologically, there tends to be a predisposition to dehydration. So it's very important that they monitor their water metabolism and stay hydrated. I'm huge that way. I have the worst problem with water metabolism most of the time. And some people accuse me of being able to hear shit really well, so.
Milton Erickson had those, remember?
He couldn't move. Yeah. That's all he had, right?
That's super expensive.
You got Erickson lines, right? Erickson gills.
Ericksonian lines.
Right? So, so those are the things that, now, when we're doing face readings, it's very, very important to be very compassionate and heart-centered when you start reading people, because they will become extremely suggestible to you, right? You don't walk up to someone with small ears and say, "You're gonna die, motherfucker," right? Because it's not true, first of all. It's completely not true. You don't say, "You're a fearful person," right? That's not true either, right? Even though functionally, behaviorally, that might be what's going on at a paleo level, at an emotional level, or at a self-identity level. That's not how they see themselves. And they're certainly not going to cop to it. But you can say things like, small ears generally indicate in most people that you're not much of a big risk taker. You like to kind of play things a little bit on the safe side, like the sure thing more than taking, right?
So true.
Right? So think cold reading types of phraseologies when you do this. Describe the behavior, don't give the label. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Describe the behavior and do it in a way that's compassionate, right? Because remember, when people are their own favorite subject, and when you start reading them, their heart's like wide open. And if the first thing that happens is you punch them in the nards, emotionally speaking, because that's the first thing that jumped out at you, and that's what will happen. When you look at somebody's face as a face reader, something will grab your attention first. Yeah.
It's like you demonstrate the understanding,
Mhm.
you don't talk about understanding.
You have to show
Show.
and be compassionate. And sometimes you have to poke the bear a little bit. And you watch their eyes. Do their eyes light up or dim when you start talking? Because you want to provoke them so that they can start to emote a little bit, so they can talk about it and process it. And if the eyes are lighting up, you're making progress, because the Shen is coming back in, and sometimes it'll be preceded by tears or some kind of emotion. So again, you're therapists, you're healers now, you're counselors. When you look at these people, look at them through the eyes of compassion. Now, sidebar, if you understood this and you applied what Chase Hughes teaches about targeting emotional weaknesses,
And
you
can
see what I'm
use that
saying?
To influence.
That's next level shit. You understand? When you learn how to target and pin and strategically strike people's emotional hot buttons, be very careful. Be very respectful of the power that you have. Okay? Thank God only one person on the planet knows both. At least now. Actually, there's a whole bunch now who are going, Chase Hughes, Chase Hughes, Chase Hughes. Face reading, face reading, face reading. Right? But again, we're the good Jedi, right? But as we clear up our own shit, we clear up other people's shit, there's a whole lot less buttons for the evil Jedi to press. Right? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take an hour for this. You're going to read 3 people. Right? I want you to find a consistent background with consistent lighting. I want you to take a before picture. I want you to do a reading. I want you to take an after picture. Find a new partner. 3 times as the subject, 3 times as the reader. You got an hour to get all 3, or all 6 in this case. Go.
You said killer's influence.
Killer influence?
Time ago.